In this video, we want to talk about theories of buyer behavior. Now, models of buyer behavior aim to identify and describe market activities and how they influence consumer buying habits. So market activities could be related to advertising, promotions, discounts, sales promotions of one type or another. Market activities can have a wide meaning, and the point of many market activities, of course, is to encourage sales and to encourage buyers to engage in the buying process. So buyer behavior is linked to a wide range of market activities. Customers are the driving force for an organization. They determine profits. Customers demand the products, and in so doing generate a revenue for the organization. When the organization subtracts its costs, it's left with profits. So customers are the driving force behind organizations. Customers are the generators of profit. It's important for organizations to understand their customer behavior and what factors influence a purchase decision. So it's necessary for organizations that they understand their customers, understand customer requirements. And this really is a part of the marketing function, to be aware of customer needs and what it is that determines customer satisfaction, and to ensure that the product that's being marketed is of appropriate quality, it addresses the needs, it's at the right price, and it has good aftercare service. So it's important that companies understand customer behavior and understand the factors that lead to the decision process to buy. And the decision process, all of the background, if you like, sub-decisions, all the other factors, all of those should be taken into account and understood, because this is what leads to a sale, and that's what companies need. Now, there are various theories of buyer behavior. Let's start with what's known as the black box model. This may be somewhat disappointing at the end. It's got a lovely title to start. But the black box model of buyer behavior is a psychological approach which identifies the human mind as the black box. So we are the black box. No one knows what's going on in our heads precisely. Companies can't tell exactly the way we're thinking. It's a black box as far as they're concerned. They see us as customers, but they're not sure how we think about the product. They're not sure about what influences are dominant in our minds and what we're thinking about. So we are a black box as far as the company is concerned. So the human mind is perceived as a black box, and the problem is what tempts people to make a purchase is unknown. So the company has to try to determine what it is that leads us to make a purchase. But really, the company has got very little idea about us or how we think. We are black boxes. Marketers see the black box like a processor in a system with inputs, stimuli, and outputs, responses. So we are like a processor in a system. We have inputs. These are the factors that impact upon us and upon our thinking, and the outputs, the way we respond to the inputs. So we've got inputs, if you like, a set of stimuli. Now these, in the context of marketing and what we're discussing here, could be a reduction in price, a marketing campaign, word of mouth from a colleague who's just purchased the item, who recommends it. There are all sorts of stimuli that, in a sense, come at us. The stimuli we receive, and then we process it. We process it in our minds, but the way we process it, that's not understood. We're the buyer, and it's a black box, and it's a question mark. What's going on in the black box? And then we have the outputs, the set of responses. Sometimes the responses are fairly predictable. The price goes down of the product, we're regular purchases, and therefore we purchase more. But sometimes the responses may be perverse or maybe not expected. The price of the product goes down and we purchase less because we think that the quality may be affected by the price, or we have some way of thinking about this that was unexpected as far as the producer was concerned. So our outputs, our responses, don't always and mechanistically follow the stimuli. The model emphasizes that the stimuli, the inputs, and the response, the output, are important elements in the buyer process. We know that we have influences, market influences. We know that the marketing department and their initiatives affect us as consumers. We know that we need to be told about the product and its attributes and its desirability and so on. We need to know about the price and its availability, where it is. But then we process it and we make a decision as to whether to buy it or not. So our response to the stimuli is not always as expected. We are humans and we're capable of surprising people. We act differently, and we act differently from time to time as well. We're not consistent in the way we respond. The stimuli, well, this involves information being fed into the black box. The organization and external factors play a major role in influencing consumer behavior. But we, if you like, the company or the marketing department feed in information, but they also feed in the products of marketing campaigns and advertising and information about the desirability of the product and fashion information, and lots of information flow into the black box. And the organization hopes that some of this, at least, will influence our decision to purchase. The response is the output of the consumer decision after processing the stimuli information. So the stimuli information, all of these bits of information that come in, these are processed by the consumer, and having processed them, the consumer has an outcome, a result, and the outcome could be to purchase the product or not purchase it, to continue looking for a different product, or simply not to purchase any product of that type later on. So we have stimuli and responses. If we look at the black box in a little more detail, we have, as I said, stimuli which is fed in. These are all the influences going into the individual, into the buyer, and the influences being the campaigns of marketing campaigns and information and advertising and all the information about the product, the price, the aftercare service, the desirability, the fashion elements associated with it, and so on and so on. So all of this is fed in, but it's fed into a black box, as I said, into us. We process this in our minds, and no one can see our minds. But out of the processing, we get the outputs, the set of responses, which could be to buy the product or not buy the product. Now let's have a look at a few factors relating to this. Let's look at the buyer characteristics for a start. At least some of the buyer characteristics. And we'll just make a list of these, because there's very little we can do in a sense to be more precise. We just know that buyers have attitude, the attitude they have got towards the product, but they've also got attitudes about lifestyles and the way they think and so on. We have motivation. Perhaps we're motivated to live in a certain way and we need the product, or we're not motivated. We have personality types. Some are quite dominant, leadership type personalities. Others are more compliant and easygoing. We have different types of motivation and personality. We have different perceptions. We see the world differently because of our background, because of our education, family, the society itself, our experiences. We have all sorts of influences in our perception. We have our lifestyle. How do we live our lives? What sort of work do we do, and what are the working conditions? How many hours a week do we work? Where do we live? What are our hobbies? Who do we mix with? And knowledge. What do we have as a reservoir of knowledge in our heads? What's our background? What's our accumulated experiences and learning? And what do we know? So buyers are extremely complicated. And this is why we're talking about a black box. Just look at the list we've got here. It's difficult to be precise about any of these. We could just list them and we can talk about the different influences. But we live with this complication day in, day out. And we cope with this and we manage it. But it's very difficult for someone on the outside to predict our behavior because of the complexity of the type of processes that are going on, the type of characteristics that we possess and we're able to display. The decision-making process, that taking the stimuli in to turn them into outputs, well, the decision-making process, that also is extremely complex. We have problem recognition. We need to recognize the problem. We need to have information search and alternative evaluation and purchase decisions and post-purchase behavior. So we have all sorts of decision-making processes that also need to be addressed. So we have different buyer characteristics, different decision-making processes. It's not surprising, therefore, that this is a black box. In terms of what goes in, the inputs, well, we have the marketing mix, we have variations in price, the price, the product, the promotion, and so on. Companies alter these, so these are input stimuli going in. We have environmental factors, the economic, the social, the cultural, the technological, political, demographics. We have all of these influences going in. So these are all the sets of stimuli going in. The buyer characteristics are going to pick up on these. Then there's going to be a decision-making process somewhere in our minds. And out of this, we'll get the set of outputs on the right-hand side. The buyer response and decision, product choice, brand selection, time of purchase and occasion, cost of purchase. So we have the outputs. What are we looking for precisely, and how have we refined all of the information coming in? You can see that the whole process is extremely complex. And so it's difficult to deal with this. But nonetheless, having said that, this is probably a true state of affairs. This is what we are. We are complicated. We're not consistent. We have many characteristics, and depending on what we're talking about, we have different attitudes and different responses to different situations. We do engage in decision-making processes. Some of them are logical and some are not so logical. Some might be emotional, or some might be just quick decisions. We have got all of many influences coming in and placed upon us. The marketing mix in this context, and the environmental factors. And out of the other side, having processed all of that, we have the responses and the decisions and what we're deciding to do. Having taken all of this information in, processed it in our heads, we decide what we're going to do. There are other models. The Engel Collat Blackwell model is quite famous. This model identifies buyer behavior as a decision process. The buyer takes sequential steps before purchase decision takes place. So it's sequential. This is what this model is suggesting. We go step by step. We we process step by step. The model assumes that a customer will encounter problems at each stage of the buying process, and marketers must understand their customer needs and the problems that arise during the buying process. So we have a series of steps before we make a purchase. Sequentially, one must happen before the other, and there are problems all the way through. And it's the job of the marketing department and the companies to ease the transition from one phase of the decision-making process to the next. They must be able to resolve the problems, help the customer resolve the problems as the customer steps through the various sequences towards a decision to buy. So we have inputs, and we'll talk about these throughout the rest of the video. We have inputs, information processing, all the inputs about the product and about different influences upon us. Information processing, we go through all sorts of processing to try and work out what to do. We have a decision process. What should we do? Having processed the information. We have all the variables that need to be taken into account, that need to be dealt with. And we have the external influences, the ones outside of the decision itself, but which may nonetheless be relevant and impinge upon our decision. So let's look at these. There are 5 of them. Let's look at these in turn, and that will bring us to the end of this video. We'll start with input. Now, a buying process is triggered with a need or a problem which the customer must satisfy. So the buying process starts with a need, and the customer must recognize the need. They must know what the need is, and they must have an idea of how to satisfy it. So that's the starting point in the process. The input stage is the information gathering related to relevant products and services that satisfy a need or resolve a problem. So having identified the need, the consumer or the customer must then go about gathering information related to relevant products and services. So it gathers perhaps a wide variety of information, looking at various products, various services, which could be used to satisfy the need. Generally speaking, we don't just look at one solution and jump at that. We tend to look at many and reflect and think about it and gather information. The customer is surrounded by marketing inputs such as advertising, promotion, the television, radio, magazines, newspapers, websites, social media. So there's a lot of information around, and the buyer must filter this information. It must try to find relevant information, relevant to the products and the services that he or she wants to purchase or he or she is interested in the context of solving the need or the want that's been identified. So it's a search process. They are searching for information. They're trying to filter out irrelevant information and trying to make sense of what is relevant and trying to do comparisons of one against the other to see which is best and which will lead to the best solution to satisfy the need. The inputs influence the choice a customer is likely to make regarding products and brands. So the various inputs of information, once a set of products have been identified, perhaps all of them suitable to satisfy the want or the need that's been recognized, it's a question of finding which is best. And it's a question, as I said earlier, of filtering out the ones which are least suited. So the customer might have found 5 or 6 products which are all good and would satisfy the need, but which one to purchase? It's a question now of sorting out the one that's most desirable. And normally this will be based on some criterion or set of criteria that the purchaser has in mind. It might be related to price or availability or reputation or past experience. But there will be something which helps the buyer to make that decision. So these are all the inputs. And these are informational inputs about products in an effort to solve or satisfy the original need. Information processing is the next step. Well, the input stage begins the processing of information for decision making. It's necessary when information is being collected to process the information. The customer will first search for experiences of the product and look at internal memory to identify any known solutions to the problem. So the customer will look inwards and see, did he or she encounter this want or need before, and how did they resolve it then? What was the mechanism? So to look to internal memory. It may not be memory about their own experiences, it might be memory about what other people said to them about their experiences. But it's stored in their memory, it's stored in the memory. So the customer may look inside themselves to try and find solutions. Internal memory contains past experiences and interactions which a customer can use to make them make an informed buying decision. So when posed with the need, having collected information, the information may be processed by talking to others, by looking at the information and trying to decide which one is best, but it may also be resolved by looking inside the person's own memory to see, did this problem arise before, and if it did, how was it resolved? How was it fixed? Was it a good solution? But also looking at what people have said about the product, and the person may remember talking to somebody who had bought a similar product and had this sort of experience. If internal memory does not offer a solution, the customer then begins the process of external search. So if they can't find anything in their memory, then they'll start to search externally for more information and to process the information they've collected. So the external search will require the customer making independent inquiries and searching for alternatives. So the customer starts the process of talking to colleagues and going online looking for reviews and looking for more information. Of course, I should say that a lot of what I'm saying here is dependent on the price of the product. We're assuming here implicitly that this product is slightly expensive and it's worth going through all of these processes. If it was a minor product, they may just buy it and try it. If it's a very cheap product, buy it and try it. But if it's slightly more expensive, they will go through this process of first of all, isolating out a small number of products which seem suitable, and then looking into themselves, looking into their memories to see which one would be best. Did they have any experience in the past? Did any of their friends have experiences in the past? And if that fails, then searching externally, looking at websites and forums and looking at product reviews and trying to determine which one is best. The depth of the inquiries depend on factors such as time constraints, environmental factors, and urgency, and also on price, as I said just a few moments ago. So the amount of time they spend in the external search depends on time, it depends on money, depends on the price, depends on environmental factors, the availability of information, and also how important is the whole thing? How important is this activity? The decision process. Well, the decision process evaluates all possible alternatives to solve the problem. Having identified a set of alternatives and having trying to decide which one is best, then the decision process evaluates all of the possible alternatives to solve the problem, the initial need that needs to be resolved. So the decision process looks at all the possible alternatives to the problem. The customer will search for brands, product descriptions, cost of current products in the market. The customer will look for a wide variety of information. They'll look for what people have said about it, what the companies say about it, about warranties, backups, support, recommendations, endorsements, and so on. And out of this, more information is added to the pool of information upon which the buyer can base the decision. The customer's internal memory, along with external search, allows customers to evaluate products based on their evaluative criteria. So it's a whole process of trying to decide internally, decide in the customer's mind which one is best, but also looking at external search factors and what the external search was saying, and also trying to decide which one would be most suitable for the buyer. So we can see it's a complex process. It happens fairly automatically when we decide to purchase something, but what this model is doing is it's exposing all of the different steps so that we can see the processes one after the other. The customer's view, opinions, beliefs, attitude, and intention influence and guide this stage. So it's for the customer's personality, background, education, sense of logic, sense of reasoning, thinking about the product. There are many issues that are going on within the buyer's head, their beliefs, their attitudes, and their intentions. A customer's decision may be influenced by a range of factors such as cost, product, features, and suitability. And these will be evaluated subjectively. They'll be evaluated in the mind of the buyer. They will look at the cost and think, is it reasonable? They'll look at the features and say, do these suit me? Is this what I'm looking for? Am I looking for something different, or is this the one I want? Will this satisfy the need? The customers may decide to follow their internal memory if this is seen as safe rather than explore other options. If possible, if they have experience of buying something similar in the past, they will rely on that experience. That's their own experience. And that can be trusted. They believe that because that is a part of them. That's their memory. Relying on others' experiences may not be as trustworthy. The others may be publishing information which is erroneous. It could be even malicious. So relying on others is not that trustworthy. Relying on internal memory, relying on their own memory may be more reliable, and customers prefer to do that if possible. The decision process variables. Well, the customer is influenced by various factors. These include these factors impact on the type of buying decisions. There are various factors that customers are influenced by. For example, we're influenced by the opinions from social groups and from peers, work colleagues, and family. When we make a decision, sometimes we need their approval. We need them to say, it's a lovely item, you've done well, how much was it? Oh, you got a bargain. We need to feel that we have made the right decision. We've been justified in the decision, and we want to please and be accepted by the peer group or by the social group or whoever. We want their endorsement. We want them to say it was good what we did. External factors such as culture, lifestyle, and social status plays a role in the type of purchase decisions made by individuals. Clearly our lifestyle will influence the type of products we would want to buy, but also the social status. We perhaps sometimes buy products to signal others about our social status, the style of clothes we wear, or the type of watch we wear, or the type of car we drive, or whatever. We use this to indicate our social status. External influences. Well, external influences affect buyer behavior and impact on decisions. The search for alternatives result in the purchase of the most favorable brand which satisfies a need. So we're looking for the most favorable brand which satisfies the need. When we've narrowed it down to 4 or 5, maybe 2 or 3 or whatever items which each of them seem like they could satisfy the need, we then go shopping for the best value. We also are keen to win the approval of our peer groups and our family and so on. So we want to buy the one which is nicest and will appeal to them. But we also want to pick one with a favorable brand. We want one which is recognizable and recognizable as good quality. The type of brand choice is influenced by factors such as culture, values, social status, peer, social groups. Brands are associated with self-image. The brand has been developed on the basis of self-image. We buy clothing to signal the world our importance and our status. And a brand image is part of that. So that's a very important way in which decisions can be made. So the Engel, call it Blackwell model, is important because it sets out the sequences and it identifies the various processes that we go through in order to satisfy a need. It's not definitive. It doesn't tell us exactly how decisions are going to be made. It doesn't indicate mechanistically how decisions are going to be made. It simply sets out a set of processes in themselves, a buying process, a set of steps that we follow, and we evaluate information, and how we evaluate information, the types of information and the search processes and so on, until we get to the stage where we make the decision to purchase. It's difficult to see any alternative to the two approaches that we've dealt with in this video. The black box and the Engel, call it Blackwell model. It's difficult to see any alternatives because we are dealing with humans here, and as humans we are very complicated. We're emotional, we're logical sometimes, we make decisions based on facts, sometimes we base the decisions on more emotions. So it's not easy to predict buyer behavior, and this is the problem that companies have got. They make products, they need to sell the products to generate revenue, which will generate profits, which will help them to pay the bills and get a return on their investment and so on, and continue in existence. But they're selling the products to people who are difficult to predict, people like you and I. That's all I'm going to do in this session. I want to leave it at that and say we've now just looked at two models of buyer behavior. There are two representations really of two complex theories or two complex approaches to buyer behavior. No definitive outcome, but they are models which help us think about buyer behavior, and that's as much as we can expect. But we're going to leave it at that now and say thank you for watching.